Welcome along, ladies and gents. Thank you so much for coming on a kind of sticky day. So I really appreciate you being here. The fear of the front row continues apace. Nobody there at all. This is our Pharma Multichannel Meetup number 5. Somehow we've made it to 5 of them. If this is your first one, welcome along. I'm delighted that you've chosen to be with us tonight. It's basically very informal. There is wine, there is pizza. And we started this because there was nowhere for kind of communications professionals in pharmaceuticals to hang out, so we created it. Me. I'm Nick. I'm a writer. I write I write about medtech because pharmaceuticals was just too fast moving. So you know, then my co-founders, James there. From 28B, epic digital engagement business, and the lovely Sarah is, and Jake as well, from Salamandra, animation, video production, that sort of thing. So we all service the pharmaceutical sector in some way. So thank you so much for coming. The other thing I want to say is thank you to our hosts. They look after hundreds of startups all over the world. They've looked after us. We've been here since the start, and they've been brilliant. It's informal. Do feel free to ask questions. There's a Q&A at the end as well. It's relaxed, it's informal. Just try and behave. Today is called Tip the Scales in Your Favour, Optimising Customer Engagement with AI and the Multi-Channel Rep. Now, this seems to me to be the challenge that pharma faces along with pretty much everybody else. If you look at retail, for example, it's how do you look after everyone's needs, whether that's consumers, patients, physicians or whatever, in a multi-channel environment, the proliferation of technologies that you've got to try and somehow juggle and keep a hand on. A couple of months ago, I was speaking to somebody outside this sector who said, multi-channel, omni-channel, it's dead. It's all dead. And it's dead because this does actually make sense. It's dead because, well, that's from our perspective as providers of services. Whereas actually, the customer only cares about one thing. It's what do I want right now? It's the Amazonification of communications. So, multi-channel, well, that's not their concern. They just want to speak to us and buy stuff in whatever sort of format they want. And that kind of seemed to me to resonate, and it means we've really got our hands full. As technology is available to field teams, to brands become more sophisticated, we've got to think about sort of several things. It's how do we optimize every conceivable engagement, and how do we make every engagement more relevant to each individual we want to talk to, and can we shorten the sales cycles? So that's the sort of things that our guests are going to be talking about. Second half of tonight, we always have a couple of guests on. Second half of tonight, some bloke called James. Met him before, seen him around on the multi-channel rep. First off, however, is this gentleman here, delving into the opportunities and, I have to say, misconceptions of AI. You're going to do the definition of AI thing, aren't you?
I am going to do it.
Okay, all right. This is Richard Gray, Director of Technology Solutions for UK and Ireland at IQVIA. Customer engagement, it says here, I'm going to read this bit, is being seen as a differentiator in transforming the life sciences commercial model. AI is the weapon du jour of enablement. In other words, we're all going to tackle it, but we've got to do it right. In this talk, Richard's going to give us his views on how the engagement landscape is changing, what companies can do and are doing to react, and the next generation approaches which will change the way we engage with customers and clinicians in the months and years to come. I wrote a bit of that, leaving it really open because he's going to cover an awful lot of ground. As I said, QA afterwards. Please do feel free to. I spoke to Richard earlier. Happy to take questions, even in the middle. Suggest he might actually know what he's talking about. Frightening. So, without further rambling, Richard, all yours. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone. Right, so as Nick says, my name is Richard. So I'm really pleased to be here tonight to get the chance to talk you through one of my favourite pet subjects of the moment, which is artificial intelligence and machine learning. So one of the great things about my job and what I do is that it gives me the opportunity to look at all the different kind of buzz trends that go through life sciences, all the different themes of conversation across companies, and certainly AI and machine learning is the hot topic of the moment. It's funny actually, I was chatting with Nick before and I had a version of buzzword bingo with him around the different terms, and if you look even just over the last 5-6 years at all the different kind of waves of buzz there's been, we did have MCM, we had multi-channel, that went into omni-channel because nothing changed but we needed something else to talk about for a bit longer. We had a bit of digital transformation just recently, and now pretty much every other conversation that I'm having with our commercial customers will revolve around advanced analytics or AI in some form. So it's a really interesting topic to come along and talk through tonight. I've got quite a few different slides to take you through. I've got some data for you, some concepts, hopefully some visuals which will help in terms of learning. I'm more than happy to share a copy of the slides for anyone that's interested, as well as we go through. I guess one of the things to think about as we start off is what is driving a lot of the conversation around advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all of this type of thing. So there are many different things, I guess, that we see going on at the moment. These two are certainly two of the major things that we see impacting and causing a challenge within our life science customers. So it's all about changes in commercial models. It's all about having to adapt within the business and evolve to meet a changing landscape, both in terms of the business models themselves, but also in terms of customers and the environment in which you can work. So you've kind of got two visuals up here. The visual on the left is actually showing a ever declining return in terms of R&D. So this is showing over a number of years the poorer return that is coming through, and this is causing an extreme squeeze in terms of SG&A and the money that is available effectively in sales and marketing. So it's affected how much money is there to promote campaigns, to be able to market and launch new products. It also impacts headcount and resources and the number of people that are there to actually go and deliver. So on the one side, we see a huge drive from an economics point of view around efficiencies and ROI. On the other side, we actually see a changing customer landscape. So we can see from an accessibility point of view, which is always a good word to use within this kind of scenario, a decline broadly in terms of levels of access to customers and healthcare professionals. We can see changes in regulations that are making it tougher and tougher. We can see changes in terms of healthcare professionals themselves and customers in terms of what they expect and how they want to be worked with. But we can also see a change from a commercial model point of view in terms of the type of stakeholders and the number of disparate customer touch points that life science companies need to get to. So all of this is effectively disrupting and causing change within the whole life science ecosystem. So AI effectively is being seen as the enabler, or is being seen as a solution of many of which there are to help to try to overcome this. So I think there are many reasons why this is starting to be the time of AI. Two of the most important things is data and technology. So we are actually now in an environment where these two particular capabilities are making it much more possible than it's ever been to start to realise some of the advantages of AI. Out of interest, just to do a straw poll, does anyone know when the term AI or machine learning was first coined? Anyone want to have a guess at a year? 60? I'm going to take it as a first guess because it's not far off at all. So 1956 actually was when the term was first coined, where an individual started to talk about connected machines thinking and learning together. So it's interesting that, as always, the current buzz and hot topic actually has been around for an awfully long time, but we just haven't actually had the capabilities to realise it as such. So we can start to see various avenues where this is starting to be deployed now within life science. So commercial, which is what I'm going to focus on today and talk through, which, to be fair, is probably the hardest element for advanced analytics and AI to be deployed within and to see a value in. There's applications within healthcare delivery, so being able to look at precision medicine being leveraged from patient genomics, and also within drug development and clinical trials and all of this kind of area. So there are lots of avenues of opportunity, and certainly as an enabler, it's a new and innovative way of being able to approach some of the challenges that are being faced. It's also one, from my perspective, where you're seeing a real heavy investment coming at the moment. So a heavy investment in terms of money, heavy investment in terms of time, but people are also making pretty heavy investments in terms of their careers around AI. So I don't know if any of you follow some of the news around the CEO at Novartis these days and what he's doing. So he's being extremely public about his drive to drive evolution within Novartis and to be able to show the proof points. And I think actually, if you look over the last sort of year or so of what he's been posting, I think he himself has even had to go through a bit of a journey where he's realising how hard it is to be able to capitalise on and get the data in the right shape and to get the capabilities to be able to push it forward. But people are investing heavy in this area, and it is not an area that is going to go away as we move forward. So, before I rush on too far into this, I think it's always good to step back and start with a definition and to try and ensure that everybody understands what AI is. So I think if you think of AI as a discipline, there are a few terms that kind of come to mind as reference points against it. So visual perception, learning, problem solving. I think these three in particular are good words to keep in your mind as we go through this presentation and as you think generally where the application comes in. This particular image is a great example of the visual perception piece. So you can see that this is actually an algorithm that has been trained around visually recognising whether it's a duck or a rabbit, and you can see A, how it works, but B, you can also see the importance of quality data and perhaps the ability for supervised learning to help the machine understand what it is actually seeing as it goes through. I think there are a few different ways that then we can look at AI, and I thought what I would do is just try and pull together a visual representation so that you can understand kind of where it fits in everything. I have two objectives out of my presentation today. You can let me know if I achieve them over a beer later. Number one is I want you to leave understanding what AI means and to be able to actually kind of converse as to where it fits in the space. And the second is I want you to leave with a few examples in your mind as to where it can be successfully deployed in customer engagement. If I can get those two things, I will have achieved my mission. So if you think of data science generally, you can think of much more kind of basic decision-making processes, so kind of classic BI sort of functions, reporting functions, if you will. Down in the descriptive bracket here, so what's happened, you're looking into the past, you're looking at some sales data, you understand there's a market share, whatever it might be. You then start to kind of move up the scale effectively as to how advanced what you're looking at is. So you move to diagnostic, why did it happen, predictive, what could happen, prescriptive, what should we do next, right through to AI, which is really about what don't we know. And effectively within this type of an example here, you can see that AI is effectively a subset of advanced analytics. And I kind of use this as a frame at the beginning because I think sometimes it can get quite confusing to actually understand what we're talking about when we're talking about different things that can be done, examples of projects, case studies, or objectives that we're trying to achieve within the data, because so many of the terms actually cross-pollinate, and a lot of the applications or techniques and approaches that are used for AI particularly are exactly the same as you would use within advanced analytics. That is why I quite often talk about AI and machine learning, because generally it's the machine learning element that is the anchor across many of the different proof points, and sometimes you might use AI within it, and sometimes you won't, but generally it all needs to be running through a vein of machine learning. So if you think about AI, think about it as a subset of a broader level of data science and a broader set of analytical capabilities. Also then, just bear in mind some of these. So I'll kind of do the dictionary around the rest of the presentation so that when we're talking through some of these things, you at least have a reference point as to what I am going on about. So algorithms, this is effectively processes or sets of rules used in calculations to generally answer questions. Machine learning, that's then the application of the algorithm in either a supervised or an unsupervised way, which enables the algorithm to be tested, to check it's working, to look at an input-output, and to be able to refine it and ensure that the algorithm is as accurate as possible. Neural networks then is a term that is related through around deriving conclusions from complex and seemingly unrelated sets of data. So quite often this is used within an unsupervised area around AI, where you don't actually know what it is you're trying to find out, but you want to point algorithms at unstructured data sets and have it come back and tell you what is actually of interest within it. Deep learning, which is another level of refinement around machine learning, and quite often we'll pull in this kind of neural network piece, or NLP, which is natural language processing. So NLP is really looking at natural language or speech data. So either written, if you're looking at chatbots, for instance, they will often use NLP within them to be able to emulate and make it feel like you're talking to a human being. And obviously chatbots then are another area of this. Some of them actually can be both auditory as well as text-based, but they actually are simulating a human interaction, and should, if they work well, they should fool you so that you think you are actually talking to a human being. So loads and loads of different terms. Hopefully it helps just to put into perspective a little bit where AI sits in the whole area of data science and some of the terms that we will no doubt then use at will through the rest of tonight. So where is AI generally against this backdrop? Well, there are loads of very, very big claims about where AI is and where AI is going to go in terms of its value within life science. I think the reality is where we stand today. Certainly when you look at it within commercial applications, it's very, very early days. Certainly across all of our customers. There are only probably a number that I could count on one hand where you can really start to see some of the application and business value starting to come back from AI. So this is a survey that we ran with a relatively small group, but of pharma execs, asking how far they were in terms of applying AI and machine learning in commercial analytics, and as you can see, basically about 90% are saying not at all, or it's really, really early days for us. So it is an area, I think, where people are pushing and looking to learn. I think most of the examples that we see at the moment are coming from clinical, they're coming from finance, they're coming from operations, because they are actually the easier areas of the business to actually apply machine learning and algorithms to get answers, because the data itself, there's a lot of it, it's generally quite well structured, it's generally quite clean, and it is quite clear what kind of business questions you need to frame to point the algorithm at solving. But we are starting to see applications now coming through within commercial environments. It's interesting to therefore sort of think, what is holding us back, or what is some of the challenge? So this is a great example. So at its heart, you need to have trust. You need to have trust in the data that is going in terms of input. You need to have trust in what is coming out and the recommendations in terms of output. And so AI itself is not the panacea, and data quality is probably more important than it's ever been. This is an example. So within China now, you can see a reaction to a growing kind of middle class section of the population, and insurance policies which are then rewarding people for how active they are. So of course you can now go and buy this on most Chinese street stalls and basically fool the system into how active you are to get rewards. So it's a slight joke, but it's very I think reflective of a broader kind of problem of trust. And if you're looking within life sciences as well, you have a lot of people who are very traditional in their approach and their mindset and what they want to do. So being able to demonstrate to them the power and the application of machine learning and advanced analytics all comes down to quality of data in, quality of data out, and its application then within a business setting. So if I just dive a little bit deeper into machine learning generally and the application of advanced analytics in life science, this is a good example of supervised and unsupervised learning at play. So one of the best areas to go and look for examples and to be able to read up is radiology, actually. There are a huge plethora of articles saying how in 5 years' time there won't be radiologists anymore and they won't be needed because actually you can train computers. So this is NLP again, looking at image recognition and being able to diagnose brain tumours. So what you can see here at the top, a good example of supervised learning, whereby you have a machine predicting an outcome from an image, which is then being compared to the radiologist's diagnosis, and you can see how accurate in most cases it is, but the machine is then being supervised, it's being taught, and it is learning. In fact, one of the broad successes of this comes from the fact that it is not one machine and one consultant who are learning and supervising together. It is actually connected to a whole network of physicians, and that is where you start to get the power out of advanced analytics and AI machine learning, is when you start to multiply out the data points and give it the ability to take many sources, but then be able to apply all of that learning into a very narrow field of conclusion. So this is a great example, as I say, of supervised learning, which is really about a known input being tested against an output from an algorithm to see how well they compare, and then to refine, learn. If you look at an unsupervised example of advanced analytics, probably it's where you don't actually know what the answer is that you're trying to achieve from the data, so you are therefore pointing at algorithms at disparate data sets and hoping that it will be able to create a meaning for you, or to be able to recognise patterns which are going to be of value to you. So we can see that there are many examples of AI being used well, and certainly within life science. What is the challenge against this? I think this again illustrates very well what some of the challenge is, and the challenge certainly within commercial is around complexity. So you've got all of the different data points and interactions happening in terms of various teams. You've got all of the different channels that can be used. You've got all of the various customers and stakeholders. Often data and technology is not particularly well connected and is not particularly well set up to be able to achieve these. But there is, I think, great application within commercial. And ironically, the fact that it is such an unstructured environment and the fact that there is so much data and it's so hard to see really is the perfect application of machine learning and AI, because when you are dealing with a scenario that is actually out of the scope for a human being to be able to assess all of those different data points and to understand all the different interactions and to play them through, that's the perfect kind of environment for AI to come into play. So commercial does present a great opportunity. If we look at that then as some particular examples of where we're starting to see the promise of AI coming through, I've just picked out some particular ones here. I won't take too long on them because I've got some more in-depth examples that we'll go into. But these are the types of improvements and the types of return that we're starting to now see across different areas of its application in commercial. For instance, the one at the top here is a reduction in cost around customer engagement, which, to be fair, is not that difficult to be able to see. If you start to think about AI machine learning being used to actually ensure that you're seeing the right customers at the right time with the right kind of message, that you're not wasting your time seeing customers where products aren't on formulary, or they just don't have the patience, or indeed they just do not respond to face-to-face as a channel, for instance, it's quite easy to start to see where you could recruit these kind of costs. And again, another example would be in the adherence section. So this is one that is commonly seen as a huge bugbear within life science, the fact that patients just do not see through courses of medicine, they do not take it. So being able again to look to identify the right intervention points when products are being prescribed and when patients are taking drugs, to be able to let them know, for instance, do you know, we've seen that you haven't taken your medicine for the last 2 days. We see that in most cases, people that don't take their medicine for 3 days in a row have complications with X, Y, Z. You know, that type of ability to recognise and then drive adherence at the right point can start to see some very impressive outputs from it. But ultimately, you have to ensure that it is being driven by a proper business question. So without kind of getting too carried away and too excited about AI and machine learning, ultimately it always has to start over on the left-hand side with the identification of a very precise business question. And you have to then explore the business question in itself. You have to think about the data that is required and available to be able to answer that question. You then need to think about what would be the right business case and algorithm to develop around it. And only when you start to see the process through should you start to then consider whether AI is actually the right tool for the job and what different approaches you can and should be taking through it. That said, I've got 3 examples which I'll share with you. How am I doing for time? I feel like I'm talking a lot. Okay, I'll hurry up a little bit. So I've got 3 examples for you. I think they're 3 really nice examples. So again, I'm trying to make them quite clear because it's good for you to be able to have solid proof points that you can start to think about and start to think how they could apply within different contexts. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the classic next best kind of scenario. So we see this in just about every conversation at the moment around next best customer as an example, and how you can look to improve that and look to put something in place that actually works with a level of precision. So this is a particular case study that I'll reference. It was successful because of the volume of data that actually went into it. So we worked with a customer here who wanted to actually dynamically target and not to kind of run with a classic kind of quarterly or 4-month, 6-month targeting and segmentation cycles, but wanted to be able to dynamically target and have it constantly evolving and changing and recommending the next best customer within an environment where they didn't want to wait 3-6 months to keep catching it up. So this worked particularly well because of the volume and scale of what we were able to put into it. Because we were able to look back at engagement and activity data against customers, we were able to look at information around prescribing habits and sales, we were able to look around different contents and channels that were used, we were able to include PMR within it. There were a whole host of different data points and sources which went into it. Which enabled it to then develop an algorithm that could be tested and refined and worked through. So within a next best kind of scenario, the application you need to be thinking about is how much data can you actually put into that and how varied can all of the data sources be, because more definitely equals better when it comes to machine learning and algorithms and predictions, because the more data points you can put in, the much better you're going to get as outputs out of it. This was great because, again, we were able to then put in the loop of learning. So for it to dynamically target and keep retargeting, it needed to know what was working and what wasn't working. Obviously, if you have a representative out in the field and she's constantly doing what the algorithm is telling her to do, she's seeing that customer, seeing that customer, seeing that customer, and the sales don't increase after 3 months, 6 months, there isn't a better level of prescribing, or market share hasn't gone up, you have to then go back and challenge the algorithm and understand how it can be better refined and made to work better. So here's an example of machine learning being utilised within the field of next best, and then being able to refine and learn and teach itself, because you need the end user to be confident and to adopt it as a technology, and they need to be able to see the proof points themselves to drive it forward.
Explain what's been done there. What are the actual values against the predicted values? What does that graph show?
So what you are seeing here is the algorithm that has been put in place to be able to calculate next best, so which is the next best customers to see. These are all then healthcare professional data points related on the prediction of the algorithm and where they should be coming in. And here you can see the correlation of how well the algorithm is identifying next best customers. So what you can see within this is a good tight concentration around the purpose of the algorithm and the question it's being tasked to answer, with very few outliers. Okay. The second example I've got, so this one, these are all, by the way, EU example. The first example there was a UK example. This one is actually from Germany. So this is all about message delivery. So next best customer is one great example. Message delivery and next best channel, next best content is another area where we see a huge amount of interest at the moment. So what you're looking at here is an example. Obviously it's been simplified so that it looks nice and pretty on a slide, but effectively you have different segments that were identified for this particular therapy area. You have different channel points up the top, and then what you are able to do is to utilize data to feed into it to start to understand the ROI and marginal ROI of different activities across different channels. So it was being driven by engagement and activity data from the customer themselves. So there were 3 years worth of data that went into this particular example against prescriptions and sales as a result of the different actions. So what you could then start to do is look at all the different permutations of face-to-face activity followed by an email, followed by a remote, face-to-face alone, email alone, and look at all the different kind of frequency and sequencing of the different channels and the different types of contacts on segments to work out where you were getting the best return from that and the best marginal return one over the next. So this was then able to produce very good predictions around what's the next best channel and the next best content to be delivering to customers, because it was able to see in what scenarios it was having the best impact ultimately on sales. Any questions on that one?
I'm struggling to see content.
The content there.
The challenge there. I'm struggling to see how the content may change.
Yeah. Yeah, this, and it, as I say, it's a vastly simplified kind of view just to get it across. What you were looking at, though, in terms of the algorithm and the application of the machine learning in the background, was to understand what type of content was being shown over what type of channels by what kind of segments, and then being able to look at all the different kind of frequency and sequencing and patterns within the data versus what was happening in terms of sales and prescriptions as a result of it. So it was taking a huge amount of different data inputs from it to be able to then provide the next best scenarios in terms of either channel or content or both together. But it is I totally appreciate it. It's a vastly simplified view in terms of a graphic from it, but it's just to be able to talk around the concept in terms of the application of machine learning and AI within this scenario of a next best channel, next best content. Okay, the last example that I have, and as I say, really this is about trying to give over some ideas to you as to how machine learning and how advanced analytics gets deployed within a commercial scenario, is one around channel optimization. And particularly within this example, it's looking around how you can actually optimize around cost of engagement. So we see a huge amount of interest, certainly at a senior leadership team kind of level, of driving down costs of engagement, either looking to be able to achieve the same with less, or to be able to achieve much more with the same level of input to it. And here is an example where, again, this was a case study that was produced on client data. He had something like 700 plus campaigns over about 50,000 healthcare professionals. I think there were about 100 different behavioural data inputs that went into this type of model. We've obviously just anonymised the different doctors across these again as a bit of a visual for you. But what you're able to do then within the approach of applying machine learning and advanced analytics is to be able to look at how you can dial different factors into the outputs. And here, what you were effectively looking to do was to dial in what was the cost of the different channels and engagements versus the impact that was achieved, to be able to identify scenarios where you could achieve the same level of impact by using cheaper channels effectively within it. So this is another area where we see a huge amount of interest. And probably, I think these three examples of a next best customer, a next best channel, next best content, and a optimization of content and channel delivery are the main ones where we're seeing at the moment the focus being from a customer and life science viewpoint. I think all of them, when you boil them down, are applying. Yes, sorry.
A question on the previous slide. You mentioned that it was one of your clients. Can you say whether it was an enterprise client, i.e. a pharma company, or was it on the agency side?
It was an enterprise client, yeah. The biggest challenge, most of the cases that we find is the data. to be able to put into it. So to be fair, unless you have a customer who has very big volume field forces, very big marketing automation programs, collects a lot of data, has a lot of years worth of history to look at, and is collecting really good data about what channels we use for what kind of content, etc., it makes it very difficult to get good predictions out. So yeah, certainly the examples where we're seeing it being applied is where you have those kind of customers with that sort of volume of data.
And that's one big problem, right?
Data. I've got 3 takeaways at the end, and data's the first one, without a doubt. Good, because quite often you'll see it as well when you're looking at things like channel optimization. You need to have the data to sort of say, well, how many emails did you send? How many face-to-face did you have? How many scenarios did you have a face-to-face followed by an email, followed by a remote call, etc., etc.? And if it's only a handful, it's just not enough data to then start to look at ROI and marginal ROI to be able to start to identify optimum journeys and optimum channel mix. So all 3 of them effectively are applying these in some way or another. I think the critical thing when you're looking at customer engagement and when you're looking at commercial is the ability to work with big data. So you need to be able to drive a level of pattern recognition, you need to have enough data points, you need to have enough scale within it to enable the machine learning to actually be able to provide good, robust outcomes from it. And being able to predict the outcome is kind of that second piece that you'll have seen again in those 3 examples, which needs to be followed by a recommended outcome, a recommended action. So if you think back to that kind of view I had of data science broadly and all of the different kind of elements that you have within it, it really needs to be driving into that prescriptive and predictive kind of output from it to enable you to be able to truly get a value. And this recommending of action piece is where quite often the biggest challenge comes in. So we quite often talk about there being these 2 kind of aspects when you're looking at advanced analytics and AI. One of them is around the need to have an analytics engine. As we describe it, I kind of use the term engine. It's a little bit broad to be fair, but it just talks about all of the different elements that need to exist to be able to achieve and generate the insights. The other is how you actually operationalize the insights from it, because in many ways it's pretty easy in theory to get a lot of data, train up some data scientists, get some algorithms, get a business question, and to be able to produce some insights from the data. I say easy in the scheme of things, but it's very possible, and we see lots of examples of being able to generate insights out of data. Being able to then actually deploy those insights within a commercial organisation and get people using the insights and adopting them is much, much, much harder. And this is why we talk about any kind of successful case study as needing to have these 2 elements to it. And quite often, a lot of the proof points and the pilots that we're seeing going on within companies are able to achieve this, but there's very few cases then where they can take it forward and actually start to show outcomes and the business adopting it and using it. And that is probably the most critical one that we see today. I pulled this together just to give some structure, I guess, to some of my thinking and to give you some ideas to leave today. This is effectively a playbook or a library of different types of applications of AI across different function types that exist within life science, compared to the different types of applications that it may be serving. I've kind of highlighted in blue some of the common cases. This is really from my perspective, to be honest. You have, for instance, the example within sales of a notification. So you could consider a really busy market, maybe diabetes, where there is a change around market share, and you want to send a notification to a salesperson that he needs to go into X account to react on it. Right through to an example here within medical, where we can see examples of chatbots being used and deployed to actually provide medical information or deal with medical information requests and to answer particular questions coming in. So we can see some of the leaders and the pioneers within this type of field starting to look at how they operationalise different functions within the business and effectively create playbooks of applications of advanced analytics to help them to understand when and where they can begin to deploy them and how they can actually go about doing that. My last slide, I promise you. So, I thought I would just finish with a little bit of a key takeaway. I guess with it, to your point, James, data is without a doubt the first. So what is differentiating customers or life science companies that we deal with in this field? I think the first is that they view data as a strategic asset. So there's a great quote here. We see this an awful lot, and we hear it an awful lot. The data scientists are probably one of the most expensive people on payroll when you look across the different business functions, and they probably spend 70 to 80% of their time trying to find data, and then when they find it, trying to actually clean it and structure it so it can be ready for use. So considering data as a strategic asset, but also thinking about how you build that capability, how you build the mindset, and how you change the way that people think within organisations is critical. And I say that there's some good examples now of people coming into pharma companies and really driving a change around mindset like this. Ultimately, better data, better algorithms, better performance. There is no shortcut to it from that perspective. And you get to better algorithms by having more data points to be able to train them on, to refine it and to drive it down and ensure that you get precision from it. And if you can get the data right, you can get it in place, and you can enable yourself to actually get good algorithms which are proving improvements in business performance, you've got to then be able to actually do something with it. And there's another quote here where you can see that the majority of projects developing algorithms fail to actually ever become operationalized and deployed within a real-time aspect. So being able to understand how you get that engagement engine part into this, and how when you're building out the pilots and the proof points, you're going to be able to broadly drive that out at scale and get people to adopt it and buy into it, is probably one of the most critical elements. So I think with that I will conclude. Anyone got any questions?
I'd like to come back to your last point there, because we are capturing the data, we're analysing the data, and yet in over half the cases we're not actually using it.
Yep.
So based on your experience, why is that, and what would you recommend to help companies actually operationalise and act upon the data they're collecting?
Yeah, great question. So there's a term that I heard used. It's a term actually from GSK. I don't know if there is anyone from GSK in. Excellent. So have you heard of value strikes?
Every day.
Excellent. There we go. So there is a term value strike. So it's the best word for pilot I've heard in ADA. I no longer talk about pilot. I like to talk about value strikes, but I have to check if anyone from GSK is in the room before I do. So there has been a huge drive within GSK, for instance, to be able to look at these value strikes, which is to look at how you can, when you're running the pilot, how you can generate the proof points to enable you to operationalise it and drive it out at scale. And it's being able to move with a level of momentum, but also with one of the key kind of business questions that you're trying to answer has to be around how are we then going to actually convince the business to adopt it. So there is one part, and quite often you focus on answering the business question, but if you don't actually address it at the same time, then how are you going to prove to the business that they should adopt it and use it? That's when you'll struggle. I mean, in the most simplest scenario, there was another conversation I was having the other day with a customer that said, do you know, we have data, bundles of data that shows that if you send an email 2 weeks after a face-to-face call with a doctor, it can have up to a 10% improvement on sales. Can I get the buggers to actually do it? He said, and literally the data is there. He said the problem is when the data backs up what people want to hear, everybody jumps on it and when they love it. And when the data doesn't back up what they believe, they just ignore it. And that is the challenge.
There's a great Tom Fishburne cartoon, I've seen it, with literally that to A and B, to be a comment like that, with somebody sitting on the table saying, look, my whole career has been built on ignoring data like this.
Exactly. Sorry.
So, I think you've pretty much only talked about how pharmaceutical companies with the implication that can use their internal data sets to gain their strategic advantage through machine learning AI. And again, surely one of the opportunities is to help the NHS or the health system to learn more about what they can do, how they can use their medication better in order to enhance lives, even if that isn't necessarily spending more money, given to being critical. So.
And to answer the question, I didn't talk about it because it wasn't on scope for the presentation. So I wanted to focus on commercial customer engagement because it's actually the hardest one to answer. So there are many more examples, and certainly if you give me your name or an email, I can send you a number of case studies around improvements in patient engagement, adherence, clinical trials, etc., etc. But I specifically didn't. I touched on them at the beginning, but then focused off of them because customer engagement actually is a more difficult one to look at. But there are a load of great examples within that remit. Hey, Kerry.
Richard, would you say things like the people in charge of communications, mostly marketing in pharma, and if marketing folk are producing brand plans for your agency, you may say to marketing, don't spend all your money on your market research. Apply some of this AI knowledge first, and if you incorporate this in this campaign, you're spending $1 million quid. It's probably more likely your campaign will work, engaging your customers and driving sales, getting your promotion. So quite a lot of it is to do with if you're agencies and you want to sell more and you want to make more money, that would be something to do. And also another thing that comes out of this for me is more content is required and faster because systems will be much more reactive. So once again, if you're working in advertising or any digital agency, you've got to be prepared to produce more content faster so that you can meet the data demand of this AI-driven systems.
We quite often will kind of talk about the 3 V's, which is volume, velocity, and variety when it comes down to data. And those kind of 3 V's are the most critical thing.
No veracity then.
Oh, you can have some if you want, yeah. But they are just as a kind of a mind anchor, I guess, the sorts of things that are critical.
Just on that content piece, just jump in. There's a massive opportunity and threat for anyone who's a content producer in terms of agencies, because increasingly there's going to be digital publishing with modular content where you're creating template websites, template detail, template, and then you're publishing from Vault or some equivalent digital asset management. So unless you're at the beginning of global content delivery and localization, that whole, we're going to make 3 different versions of this website, and when we update it, you have to update one. That's kind of parsing. So there's a threat in that being at the low end delivery is a threat, but if you're at that front end, that's a real positive. The other thing is we're going to need a ton more content for personalized, curated engagement with customers. Tons of content. And pharma do not have the budget to create the amount of content that they're going to require for this sort of application. So again, it's going to come down to reworking existing content, modular bits of content that are swapped around to, kind of typical SEOs.
Well, you just don't go down the production route, the curation of content.
But even if you
look at collaboration.
Yeah, but I agree, but I still think there's a massive,
It absolutely is an increase, but not necessarily think about it just being produced in-house.
Oh yeah, for sure. We touched on that, I touched on that whole come to our website to learn rather than go to wherever it actually goes to learn, and actually signposting rather than producing. I have a question, sorry, one quick one.
You want?
It's what I'm talking next.
Yeah, it's all right, yeah. Good bookend.
I saw consent up on one of your slides.
Yes.
36% improvement in consent. Are we talking like marketing consent, GDPR consent?
Correct. Yeah. So the example there from the consent was being able to identify what would be the best content to trigger an interest in people to consent, basically. So if you're going into certain types of segments or certain types of behaviour groups, understanding if you could dangle the carrot of, if you'd like some more information on this, I can send something to you. Can you give me your email address type of thing? So it's being able to again and recognise the patterns in behaviour types or segments and knowing what's the anchor or the link.
Richard, I will let you go in a moment. This gentleman was waiting for ages and ages and ages. Hold up. We've got another question there for this chap here. Sorry.
So you mentioned the importance of data in your presentation.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on data integrity.
Yeah.
And really, you mentioned trust earlier on. what behavioral changes have we seen implemented in order to ensure that data integrity is increased, and therefore to answer the questions more accurately?
Yeah. So data integrity, I'm not going to try and answer it when I don't have a specific answer for you. What I can say is that in terms of being able to drive adoption itself, or being able to drive a change in mindset, it is extremely important to bring the end users with you on the journey as you're going through it. So a lot of it comes down to good communications practice and good change management on being able to take people from a mindset A to a mindset B and to bring you there. I also think some of what I've seen being done within companies where they're really passionate about driving it as well is to accept the fact that not everybody will make that journey as well. So to not try and accommodate everybody, kind of bring everyone on the journey, but be very clear as to what the type of people, what the type of mindset, and what the objective is that you're trying to achieve as a business, and to kind of drive people towards it and ensure you have the right people there for. We're seeing a lot of employment now within life science of people that are kind of ex-Amazon, ex-Google, ex-IBM Watson, etc., etc. So we're starting to actually see a lot of that being brought in as well, because life science isn't necessarily seeing the right type of mindset internally to drive it. I didn't really answer your question, but hopefully it gave a little bit of insight.
Guys, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Gray.